It was 1 a.m. when the doorbell rang. The sound echoed through the stillness of the night, dragging me out of sleep. I wasn't expecting anyone at this hour. My heart pounded as I walked toward the door, puzzled. But what I found on the other side was nothing short of a shock. Sophie, my daughter, stood there in the cold, eyes red and swollen, tears streaming down her face. She wasn't the confident woman I remembered. Her face was drawn, hollow with despair, and she was carrying 2 heavy suitcases. "Mom, I don't know where else to go," she whispered, her voice shaking. I helped her inside, confused, still trying to process what was going on. Her husband, Edward, was nowhere to be found. He'd left her. But what she didn't know was that this wasn't just a visit. Her world was crumbling, and she had no idea that the secrets I had kept for so long were about to come to light. Sophie had abandoned me before, sold my house, the place where I had spent so many years with Jack, my late husband. But now she was back, with nothing, and I had to decide how to move forward. I'm Martha Williams, 65 years old. The days of my youth feel like a lifetime ago. I've spent most of my time in the peace of my home by the lake, reading, tending to my garden, and savoring the quiet. But everything changed 5 years ago when Jack, my husband of 40 years, passed away suddenly from a heart attack. He was my rock, the man who built everything I loved. Without him, I was lost. For the first few years, Sophie came to visit more frequently. I thought she was coming because she cared, because she wanted to spend time with me. But looking back, I realize now that she wasn't coming to check on me. She was coming to make sure I was okay. She helped me with the funeral arrangements and made sure I had everything I needed. But the visits became fewer, and soon enough, I was alone again. She had always been so driven. She moved to the city to chase a career, leaving behind her small-town roots. I always thought I was supportive, but in the end, I didn't realize how far away she'd really gone. When I found out what she had done, selling my house, I was devastated. She thought I wouldn't notice. She thought I didn't know about the money she was taking from me. But she had no idea how far I'd come to protect her and how deep the secrets went. The next morning, after Sophie had settled in on the couch, I made a pot of coffee, trying to ignore the unease gnawing at me. She was still asleep, exhausted from her late-night arrival. I couldn't stop thinking about the call she made the night before. The words echoed in my mind, repeating over and over. "I sold your house, Mom. We needed the money. I'm sorry." It stung. I had built that house with Jack. Brick by brick. It wasn't just a house. It was our sanctuary, where we had raised Sophie, celebrated birthdays, Christmases, and long summer nights by the lake. That house held every memory I had of Jack. Now, Sophie had taken it all away. When she woke up, she sat down with me in the kitchen, her head down. I didn't know how to start the conversation, but she did. She was trying to explain herself, but I wasn't sure I could hear it. The betrayal was too fresh. I didn't want to do it, Mom, but I didn't have a choice. Edward and I are in serious debt. The business failed. We were getting behind on everything, and I needed the money. I stared at her, my heart breaking. The guilt in her voice was palpable, but it didn't change the fact that she'd sold my house. My house, my sanctuary, was now gone. "Do you realize what you've done, Sophie?" I whispered, almost unable to look at her. Sophie's gaze dropped to her lap. She could barely meet my eyes. I had no choice, Mom. I didn't know what else to do. I thought if I sold the house, we could get out of this mess. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her how much that house meant to me. But more than that, I wanted to tell her how much it hurt that she thought I could be discarded so easily. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was someone she thought she could use when it was convenient. I left the kitchen, walking toward the living room, needing space. That's when I saw it. The letter from Jack, tucked away in the drawer. The manila envelope he had handed me just days before his heart attack. The letter I had forgotten to open. And then it all came rushing back to me. I pulled it out of the drawer. the weight of it heavy in my hands. I hadn't wanted to open it before. I wasn't ready for what was inside. But now, as I stood there, reeling from the betrayal, I needed answers. I needed to understand why Jack had kept this secret. I opened it slowly, my fingers trembling, and read the letter aloud to myself. Antonia, if you are reading this, it means I'm no longer with you. Please forgive me for not telling you everything sooner. I wanted to protect you from the worry, but now it's time you knew. Over the years, I've been investing in properties and businesses. We don't just have this house, we have much more. You are wealthier than you think. I've kept this secret from you, not to deceive you, but to make sure you always had what you needed, even if I wasn't around. I stopped reading for a moment, the words sinking in. We had other properties. We were rich. But Jack had hidden it all from me. The letter continued. There are properties in the city, businesses, investments, things that will secure your future. I've made sure that if something were to happen to me, you'd have everything you need. You are rich, Antonia. You always have been. My hands shook as I finished reading. I sat down on the couch, trying to process what I had just learned. Sophie had sold my house, thinking it was all I had left. But she didn't know about the other properties, the wealth Jack had built up for us. She thought I was helpless, but now I realized just how much Jack had been protecting me. The betrayal stung even more now. Sophie had taken everything without knowing the truth. She hadn't just sold my house. She had stolen a future I didn't even know I had. As I sat there, reeling from the weight of the letter, I knew what I had to do. Sophie had taken what wasn't hers to take, but I wasn't going to let her destroy everything Jack and I had built together. I needed to collect proof. I needed to find the legal documents, the deeds, the bank accounts, everything Jack had set up. If Sophie thought she could get away with this, she was sorely mistaken. I was going to get my house back, but more than that, I was going to show Sophie that there were consequences to her actions. She would have to face the truth, and face me. The next few days were a blur of frantic energy. I knew I had to act fast, but I also needed to be careful. Sophie was still staying with me, though she spent most of her time in her room, avoiding any serious conversation. She was deep in thought, likely trying to figure out what to do with the mess she'd created. But I was focused on something else. I needed to find the proof, the documents that Jack had hidden for me. The envelope Jack had left me contained more than just a letter. Beneath it were deeds to multiple properties that I had no idea we owned. There were bank statements, too, ones that Jack had set up in secret accounts I didn't even know existed. The more I went through it, the clearer it became. Sophie had sold my house, not knowing that I had a financial empire at my fingertips. But I couldn't just take this evidence and confront her. I needed more. I needed to know the full extent of what had been done, to gather everything in a way that would ensure Sophie couldn't weasel her way out of it. I called Mr. Peterson, the lawyer who had handled all of Jack's legal affairs. He was a quiet man, the kind of lawyer who handled everything by the book, which is exactly what I needed. When I told him about Sophie selling the house and the discovery of the additional properties, he was concerned, but he didn't seem too surprised. Mrs. Williams, I can help you with this, he said on the phone. We'll need to track down the deeds to those other properties and check the legitimacy of that sale. If it was done fraudulently, we can certainly nullify the sale. I made an appointment with him for the next day. It felt strange, walking into his office as if I were the one in control. I had never had to deal with things like this before, but Jack had left me with a plan, and it was time to follow it. When I arrived, Mr. Peterson greeted me with his usual polite smile, but his expression shifted when I showed him the documents Jack had left behind. Mrs. Williams, this is much more than I anticipated, he said, leafing through the papers. It's clear that your husband had a plan for you. These properties, these investments, they'll be more than enough to take care of you. But I need to advise you to proceed carefully. Sophie will likely fight this. I know, I replied, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside me. I don't want to fight her, Mr. Peterson, but I need to make sure this doesn't happen again. She can't just take what's mine. We spent the next few hours going over everything, tracking down the properties, verifying the deeds, confirming the bank accounts. It was methodical, almost like a detective case. The more we uncovered, the clearer it became. Sophie had acted rashly. She had sold the beach house for a fraction of its true value, not knowing that we owned so much more. But there was still one piece of the puzzle missing. How had she gotten access to the house and sold it without my consent? I remembered the power of attorney Sophie had asked me to sign a few months after Jack's death. She told me it was to make handling his estate easier, especially with all the legal details that came with his passing. I had been so overwhelmed with grief, so lost in the void Jack had left behind, that I signed the papers without fully understanding what they meant. That was the key. Sophie had used that power of attorney to sell my house. It was legal, but it was done under false pretenses, because I had never intended to give her that kind of control. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was a lie. Mr. Peterson, after reviewing the documents, confirmed my worst fear. This power of attorney was used for the sale of the beach house, Mrs. Williams, but you didn't know about the full extent of it. I think we may have a case of fraud here, and we need to act quickly. I felt my chest tighten with a mix of anger and relief. This wasn't just a bad decision on Sophie's part, it was criminal. She had manipulated the legal system to take what wasn't hers, and now I had the proof I needed to take it all back. I thanked Mr. Peterson and left his office, my mind spinning with everything I had learned. I knew what I had to do next. I had to get the house back. But it wasn't just about the beach house anymore. This was about teaching Sophie a lesson. She needed to understand that actions have consequences, that she couldn't just waltz through life thinking everything could be solved with money. When I got home, I found Sophie sitting in the living room, staring blankly at the TV. She didn't even look up when I walked in. "Mom, what's going on?" she asked softly, her voice tired, but there was a hint of guilt in it. I sat down across from her, looking her in the eye. "Sophie, I've learned a lot in the past few days, and there's something you need to understand." Her gaze flickered nervously, and I could tell she was starting to realize that the situation was far worse than she'd thought. "You've made a huge mistake, and it's time for you to face the consequences." Her eyes widened, but she didn't say anything. I could see the guilt and fear rising in her, but she wasn't ready to face it yet. "You think you've taken everything from me, Sophie," I said quietly, "but you've only just started to see what's coming. I'm going to take it all back, and then you'll have to make things right." It didn't take long for Sophie to realize I wasn't just going to let this slide. I'd made my decision, and there was no turning back now. The days that followed were filled with tense silences between us. Sophie, who had once been so full of bravado, was now a shadow of herself. I could see the fear creeping into her eyes every time she glanced at me. She knew I had found out the truth, and she knew that I wasn't going to forgive her this time. The phone calls from her lawyer came in, but I didn't pick up. I already knew what they were about. Sophie was trying to clean up the mess she'd made, but there was nothing she could do. The sale of the house was illegal. I had proof. The power of attorney had been manipulated, and I was ready to take action. It was the evening when Sophie finally cornered me. I had just finished cooking dinner, a pot of chicken soup simmering on the stove. I could smell the herbs and garlic mixing with the comforting warmth of the broth. It reminded me of the good times Jack and I had spent in this very kitchen. Sophie came into the room, her hands clasped together, wringing them nervously. She had her "I'm sorry" face on, the one she used when she knew she was caught. "Mom," she began, her voice faltering, "I know I've made a huge mistake, but I want to make things right. I'm sorry for everything I've done to you. I didn't know what else to do. I thought I could fix everything, and now, look where we are." I didn't respond right away. I turned my attention to the stove, stirring the soup slowly, letting the silence hang between us. "You're sorry?" I finally asked, my voice cold. "You think a simple apology will fix this, Sophie? Do you think I'm just going to forgive you because you're sorry?" Sophie's eyes welled up with tears. I just wanted to make everything better for us. Edward and I, we were in so much debt. The business failed, and I thought if I sold the house, I could fix it all. I didn't mean for things to turn out like this. I put the spoon down and faced her, crossing my arms over my chest. "Sophie, you've been planning this for months, haven't you? You sold my house, the one Jack and I worked so hard to build, and you didn't even ask me. You didn't even think to consult me. You took everything from me without a second thought." She shook her head, her voice pleading. "Mom, I didn't know. I thought you'd be fine. I thought you'd understand. But I see now. I see that I've done something terrible. I think you finally understand the consequences of your actions," I said, my voice steady, but underneath it there was a simmering anger I could barely contain. "But let me make one thing clear. This isn't just about the house. It's about trust. It's about you treating me like I don't matter, like I'm disposable." Sophie stepped closer, reaching out to touch my arm. "Mom, please. I know I messed up, but I'm here now. We can fix this together, okay? Just tell me what to do, and I'll make it right. I'll help you." I pulled my arm away, my eyes narrowing. "You want to help me? You want to make it right? You can start by admitting what you did, Sophie. You sold my house. You sold everything that was mine, without asking, without any thought of what it would do to me. You took it all, and now you think a few tears and words of regret will make it better?" I could see her trembling now, her face flushed with shame. But I wasn't finished. "You didn't just sell a house, Sophie. You sold our memories. You sold the last thing Jack and I had together, and you didn't care. You were too busy thinking about yourself to even consider what this would do to me." I could feel my heart racing as I spoke. The years of sacrifices, the love I had given, the trust I'd placed in her, it all seemed to vanish in an instant. Sophie had betrayed me, and now there was no turning back. "This is the last time I let you get away with treating me like this," I said, my voice low but firm. "You think you can take my things and just walk away without consequences? I've let you get away with enough, Sophie. Now, you're going to face the truth. You've crossed a line, and I won't be your fallback anymore. Not this time." Sophie stood there, stunned into silence. Her tears had stopped, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't know what to say. I could see the regret in her eyes, but it was too little, too late. I took a deep breath and walked over to the table where I had been keeping the documents. The papers were laid out in front of me, each one more damning than the last. I turned to Sophie, who was still standing motionless in the doorway. "You want to fix this?" I said, grabbing the pile of legal documents and holding them out in front of her. "Then take a good look at these. This is the proof of what you did. I'm going to get my house back, and I'm going to make sure you pay for this. You don't get to walk away from this, Sophie." Sophie took the papers from me, her hands shaking. She stared down at the legal documents, her face pale, her lips trembling. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The silence between us was louder than any words she could have spoken. The days that followed were a blur of action and preparation. Sophie was silent, barely speaking to me unless absolutely necessary. She spent most of her time in her room, consumed by the guilt of what she had done. I could see her, crumbling under the weight of her actions, but I wasn't about to soften the blow. She had made her bed, and now she would lie in it. I didn't waste time. I called Mr. Peterson again and made arrangements to meet with him the following morning. The sale of the beach house was fraudulent, and the paperwork clearly indicated that Sophie had used the power of attorney without my full knowledge. It wasn't just a matter of getting the house back. It was about ensuring Sophie faced the consequences of her actions. She couldn't just take everything from me and think she could get away with it. This wasn't just about money. It was about principle. Mr. Peterson was as methodical as ever. When we sat down together, I could see the seriousness in his eyes. Mrs. Williams, I've spoken to the authorities, and I believe we have a solid case here. We can go ahead and have the sale of the house nullified. The new owners are unaware of the situation, so they'll be able to return it without issue. But I suggest you also consider legal action against your daughter. Fraud is a serious offense. I hesitated. It wasn't that I didn't want to teach Sophie a lesson. I did. But the thought of putting her through a legal battle, especially knowing how fragile she was right now, made my stomach turn. I want the house back, I said firmly. But I don't know if I can go that far with Sophie. She's my daughter. Mr. Peterson gave me a knowing look. I understand, Mrs. Williams. We can proceed with getting the house back first, and then you can decide what to do about Sophie. But make no mistake, she's made a grave mistake here. It was at that moment that I realized the full weight of what Sophie had done. She didn't just sell a house. She had put my trust in her at risk. She had put her own desires above everything we had built as a family. I didn't know if she could ever truly understand how much damage she had caused. We moved forward with the legal process to get the beach house back. The new owners, a couple from the city, were cooperative. They had no idea the sale was fraudulent and agreed to return the property as soon as they were informed of the situation. I felt a small sense of relief, but it wasn't enough. Sophie had to know that this kind of behavior wouldn't be tolerated. The next day, I sat in my living room with the documents in hand, waiting for Sophie to come downstairs. I could hear her footsteps approaching, and my heart raced. This was it, the moment of truth. She needed to hear from me directly that she had crossed a line and that she would be held accountable for her actions. Sophie appeared in the doorway, her eyes downcast. She was still wearing the same clothes she had worn the night she arrived, as though she hadn't bothered to change. Her hair was messy, and there was a look of defeat on her face. "Mom," she started, but I interrupted her. "No, Sophie, not this time," I said firmly. "I've already spoken to a lawyer. The house is being returned to me, and the sale is nullified. You don't get to walk away from this without consequences. What you did was illegal. You sold my house, my memories, without even asking me. You didn't even give me the chance to say no, and now you're going to face what you've done." Her face turned pale and she took a step back. "Mom, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I thought it was the only way." I stood up from my seat, holding the documents in my hand. "You thought? You didn't think about me, about what this house meant to our family. You didn't think about how I would feel when I found out what you did. You don't get to just sweep this under the rug. I'm not going to sit here and pretend it didn't happen." Sophie's eyes filled with tears, but I didn't soften. Not yet. She needed to hear this. "I'm going to make sure you learn from this, Sophie," I said, my voice steady. "You may be my daughter, but that doesn't mean I'll let you walk all over me. You can't take what's mine, and you can't treat me like I don't matter." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. Sophie's hands were shaking now, but she didn't speak. There was nothing she could say that would fix what had been broken. "I've done everything for you," I continued. "Everything I've ever done was for you, Sophie. And this is how you repay me? By selling everything we had without asking? I'm not going to let this slide. You will pay for what you've done, whether it's with your actions or with your understanding that there are consequences to this behavior." Sophie opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. She just stood there frozen, staring at me as though the gravity of the situation had finally hit her. I wasn't sure what would happen next. Would she apologize again? Would she try to fix it? I didn't know, but I knew one thing. The road ahead for both of us wouldn't be easy. And as I watched her walk out of the room, tears in her eyes, I felt a pang of sympathy. I knew she was suffering, but this was something she had to face. I wasn't going to rescue her. I had to let her learn the hard way. It wasn't until a few weeks later that I saw Sophie begin to change. The house was back in my name, and I had made sure to lock down every legal piece of it. But even with the beach house returned to me, I couldn't just go back to the way things were. Something had shifted between us. Maybe it was the betrayal. Maybe it was the weeks of silence. Or maybe it was the fact that Sophie had finally hit rock bottom and realized the weight of her actions. I kept to my routine. I spent my days tending to the garden, reading in the sunroom, and trying to heal from everything that had happened. But I also kept my eyes open. I didn't know if Sophie was truly ready to change or if this was just a phase. But I could see the subtle shifts in her behavior that hinted at something different. One afternoon, Sophie came into the living room while I was reading. She sat down across from me, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She was wearing a simple shirt and jeans, no makeup, and she looked like a different person. She had been working late at a part-time job she'd gotten at a local cafe. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was the first time in a long time that I had seen her actually trying to stand on her own. "Mom," she began, her voice soft, but there was a new sincerity in it that made me pause. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, about what I did, about what you said to me that night. I was so angry, but now I see it. You were right." I didn't say anything at first. I just looked at her. My heart heavy with a mixture of pain and hope. Sophie wasn't asking for my forgiveness. Not yet. But I could hear it in the way she spoke. She wasn't just regretful. She was beginning to understand the depth of her mistakes. "I've been working at the cafe," she continued, her voice cracking slightly. "I'm not making much, but I'm learning something. I'm learning how to do things for myself. I'm learning how to work for what I want, not just take from others." I didn't interrupt her. I just nodded, watching her closely. "I've been trying to save up," she said, her eyes meeting mine, "for a place of my own. I know I messed up with you, and I don't expect things to go back to the way they were, but I want to make it right. I want to prove that I can take care of myself without using you or anyone else." It wasn't a grand apology, but it was the apology I needed, and it was the first step toward healing, not just for her, but for me too. I knew I had to let go of the anger and disappointment that had built up over the weeks. Holding on to that would only keep me trapped in the past, and I wasn't ready for that anymore. I reached over and placed my hand on hers. "I'm proud of you," I said quietly. "It's not going to be easy, but you're on the right path. You've got to keep going, keep learning. But remember this, what you've lost can't just be fixed with an apology. It's going to take time. But I'm here, Sophie, and I will always be here when you need me. Just remember, this relationship isn't a one-way street anymore. You have to work for it too." She squeezed my hand, her eyes glistening with tears. "I will, Mom. I promise." That night, I sat on the porch, the wind gently rustling the leaves in the trees. I thought about Jack. I thought about the life we had built and the family we'd raised. I thought about Sophie and how she'd broken my heart, but also how she had started to pick up the pieces of her own life. I had done everything I could for her. Now it was her turn to learn the most important lesson of all: responsibility, respect, and the value of hard work. The next morning, as Sophie got ready for work, she came over to me, holding a small envelope. It was from the university. She had applied for an adult education program. She was going back to school, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. "I'm going to study social work," she said with a hopeful smile. "I want to help people, Mom. I want to give back. I want to do something meaningful." I could see the determination in her eyes. She wasn't the woman who had sold my house anymore. This was someone different, someone who had learned from her mistakes. "I'm proud of you, Sophie," I said, smiling for the first time in a long while. "That's the first step in truly understanding the value of what you've been given." As Sophie walked out the door that morning, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Our relationship wasn't fixed in a day, and it wasn't perfect. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were on the same path. She was learning the value of the things that truly mattered: family, love, and responsibility. And I knew that no matter what happened, I had done my part. I had taught her the lessons I needed to, and now it was up to her to finish the journey. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Would you stand by your child even after the ultimate betrayal? Or would you let them face the consequences of their actions? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. If you found this story moving, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Stay tuned for more stories like this. And remember, no matter what life throws your way, you always have the power to make the right decision, even when it's hard.